So is it visible?
Yeah, it's visible. But just please wait for about 1 minute. Yeah, now you can start, please.
Okay, so I'm starting.
Yeah. হ্যাঁ, তুমি স্লাইড ভিউতে চলে যাও না, প্রেজেন্টেশন মোডে। হ্যাঁ, কিছু প্রবলেম হচ্ছে, নিবে, ঠিক আছে, এভাবেই চালাও।
So
কি হলো সুকন্যা?
sir, এটা
হ্যাঁ,
প্রেজেন্টেশন মোডে আসছে না?
না আসছে না, ঠিক আছে, ডোন্ট ওয়ারি, এভাবে করো, দেখা যাচ্ছে।
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. This is the Cat's Paws presenting before you all, and the topic given to us is an analysis of adult and child sex ratio of all the states in India. The entire population of a society can broadly be divided into two categories: the adult population, comprising members of age group above 6, and children of age 6 and below. Sukanya, please move on to the next slide.
লগ অন, ওকে।
Okay, so in India, the proportional distribution of the genders in a population aggregate expressed as number of females per 1000 males is known as sex ratio. And we have followed this convention in our analysis. Here, a lower value of sex ratio is considered to be worse than a higher value, unlike other countries. Moving on to the next slide. Population enumeration by gender composition is one of the basic demographic characteristics. Changes in gender composition largely reflect the underlying social, economic, and cultural patterns of the society in different ways. Now, sex ratio is an important social indicator to measure the extent of prevailing equity between males and females in a society at a given point of time. It may be noted that the sex ratio is expected to be almost at parity in nature, that is, a 1:1 ratio. Sex differential in mortality, sex selective outmigration, skewed sex ratio at birth are the major contributory factors that influence changes in sex ratio. Many societies across history have had strong preferences about male or female children as well as gender roles. According to our data, we have seen that the skewness, which is a measure of lack of symmetry, is minus 1.924 for adult sex ratio and minus 0.717 for child sex ratio. This suggests that the population is highly skewed in favor of males, and it has continued to rise and expand in various forms. This has drawn wide attention of the policymakers and planners to reverse the trend to bring it back to parity. Hence, finding out sex ratio is an important parameter of the economy. Now, Sukanya will take over from here.
Am I audible, sir? Okay. So now we look at a few overall trends in India. Now, as we've seen that changes in the sex composition is an important indicator of the underlying socio-economic and cultural patterns in the society in different ways. Now, we've tried to plot the sex ratio for the years 1991, 2001, and 2011 based on the census data. And here SR denotes the overall sex ratio for the nation, and CSR is the child sex ratio. Now, as is evident from the graph, in 2011, the overall sex ratio is 940 females per 1,000 males, and the graph shows that there has been an increase in the overall sex ratio over the years, but the child sex ratio has been dropping, and it's currently at the lowest in the last 20 years at 914 female children per 1,000 males. This could be because of a variety of factors like sex selective abortions, female feticide, female infanticide, etc. Moving on to the next slide, we have done a spatial mapping to see the variation in the sex ratios for adults and children across the different states of the country. The data used is the 2011 census data. Here as well, we can see that there is a kind of a north-south divide, with the northern states having a relatively lower to moderate adult and child sex ratios, while the southern and the eastern states having higher adult and child sex ratios. To sum it up, the features that we have noticed across these two graphs and these two maps are as follows. So the states of northern and northwestern India have an adult sex ratio ranging from very low to moderate. The child sex ratio for these states tend to follow a more or less same pattern as that of the adult sex ratios. Now, the lower child sex ratios, especially in the states of Haryana, Punjab, Gujarat, is primarily because of high female feticide rates, sex selective abortions, etc. Now, even though a number of laws have been enacted to stop sex selective abortions and to stop sex determination, the low child sex ratio in these states is an indication that this is still continuing in India. The states of southern India and eastern India have a relatively higher adult sex ratio, and the child sex ratio is also in between moderate to high values. The high adult sex ratio for the southern states can be attributed to high literacy rates and life expectancy of the females. So this concludes our presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, very good. I think just one question. In slide 3, will you go to
Yes,
slide 3, please?
yes, I'm going.
That was before the line graph.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. How did you calculate the skewness?
Sure, so we calculated it from the Excel sheet, giving the skewness formula and on the ASR and CSR respectively.
Yeah, no, that I understand. You used the Excel formula, but what was
Yes,
the
sir.
data? Was it the sex ratios?
Yes, sir, the sex ratios.
Okay, so you calculated the sex ratios for all the states, and then you
Yes, sir. Yes, so we have
calculated the
filtered the
skewness.
data
Okay,
first, and then we have
yeah,
calculated the sex ratios and then the skewness.
okay. Okay, so can you go to slide 4, please?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, so this is a bit of a puzzle in the sense that I mean, it indicates an improvement. The adult sex ratio is going up, so we are attaining parity. But the problem is that the child sex ratio is falling consistently over all the 3 census years. This is what is alarming. Okay, so that means mm, the problem has not gone, because as you have rightly said that because of women education, perhaps workforce participation, adult women are more likely, are better able to take care of themselves, but the girl child is being discriminated against. And we possibly still have what Amartya Sen called the phenomenon of the missing child. Okay, so I'll send you this paper. You can all read it. But thank you for a very nice presentation. You can stop presenting now. And
Thank
you
you
have
so
already
much.
sent me the slide.
Yes.
স্যার এতদিন কি দুটো পেপারই দিয়েছেন?
বুঝতে পারলাম না কি
না
বললে তুমি?
দুটো পেপার কি দিয়েছেন এতদিন?
দুটো পেপার মানে?
না দুটোই দেখছি এখানে আছে, তাই জন্যই বলছি।
ও আচ্ছা, তুমি ক্লাসরুমে বলছো?
হ্যাঁ
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ।
মানে এইটা যেটা বললো সেটাও কি মানে ওই থেকেই, মানে দুটো থেকেই?
না, এটা ওরা নিজেরা বার করেছে। নিজেরা ম্যাপ এঁকেছে, পুরো কাজটা ওরা নিজেরা করেছে। র ডেটা থেকে ওরা এস্টিমেট করেছে।
হ্যাঁ মানে ওইগুলো পড়তে হবে, আর যেগুলো ইউটিউবে যেগুলো আসছে সেগুলো পড়তে হবে, তাই তো?
হ্যাঁ।
ঠিক আছে।
Okay. So, I'm returning to the topic that I started in the last class, which is urbanization in India. Okay. So, as was discussed in one of the presentations, an urban area is a human settlement which has a very high density and is supposed to have a very densely populated uh, urban built environment. That is, the buildings are very close together, the people are residing close together, and the civic facilities are also supposed to be better compared to rural areas. Now, in India, we follow the definition that an urban area should have a minimum population of 5,000. The density should be at least 400 persons per square kilometer, and it should be a non-agricultural sector, primarily a non-agricultural economy. So 75% of the male working force should be working in non-agricultural activities. In addition, if the area is administered by an urban body, corporation, cantonment board, notified town area committee, then it is automatically considered to be an urban area. So we have a demographic criteria, an economic criteria, and a political or administrative criteria. The first two are the demographic criteria. The third is the economic criteria, and lastly we have the administrative criteria. Now, if you look at the evolution of cities in India over time, we will see that it is bound on, sorry, the heading is, sorry, the heading is wrong. I'll just change it. So if you look at the evolution of cities, starting from the British rule, we will see that there are certain structural features. See, migration in India is primarily, to a large extent, it is fueled by migration. And in India, there are two main reasons for migration. Can you guess what is the most important reason for migration in India?
So employment opportunities.
No. I would also have answered the same way 1 or 2 years ago, but it's not employment opportunity. It is marriage. Marriage is the most important reason for migration. But apart from marriage, where we have the migration of the females, the second most important reason is work. And in case of migration for work, it is the male members who migrate. Such migrations can be seasonal in some cases. So that means you come to urban areas in particular months of the year and then return. It can also be semi-permanent. That is, you come to the urban area, you work there till you become too old to work, and then you return to the rural area. So such migration is semi-permanent, and to some extent it is, well, I won't say it's cyclical, but uh, you have a reverse flow after some time. Now, when migration occurs for work, in many cases, or rather in the majority of cases, the workers do not take their families along with them. The reasons are restrictions on female mobility because of cultural norms. It is also because of housing conditions. Uh, what can happen is several male workers can join together, form and rent out a particular room. So bringing in their families will lead to problems in such settlements. So what they do, they come over there to the cities, only the male workers, they live, and periodically they return to the homes in the rural areas. So they are separated from the families for a long period of time. So this means that it is the male people who are coming to urban areas, the females are remaining in rural areas. If you look at migration, the sex ratio in urban areas, then this is pretty low, lower than in rural areas. The second important feature of the migration of the urbanization pattern in India is between 1901 and 2016, we will see, we can see that the share of manufacturing has gone up. So in over 100 years, manufacturing has become important, but marginally, from 5% to 15%. This is more than 100 years, but the increase is only 10%. In contrast, the service sector rose substantially from 25% to nearly 70%. So almost 3 times increase. So in India, what happened was there was a skipping of the manufacturing revolution in India. In other countries, mainly in Europe, there was the economy made a transition from agriculture to manufacturing and from manufacturing to services. In case of India and many developing countries, the transition was from the first to the third stage directly. This has led to a hypothesis being put forward, which is called the over urbanization hypothesis. So it argues that urbanization in developed countries is related to manufacturing. If we look at the relation between manufacturing, as it grows, urbanization also grows. But in developing countries like India, the manufacturing is growing very slowly, but urbanization is growing much faster. So this led to the proposition that uh, given the size of the manufacturing sector, the urban population is much higher than it should be. That is why it is called over-urbanized. The third structural feature of Indian urbanization is that There's a very strong relation between development of the state and urbanization rate. The correlation coefficient is almost 90%. So those states which have grown very fast economically have also experienced urbanization. So between 71 and 2011, India's urbanization increased from around 20% to 31%. Many Asian, during this period, many Asian and African countries, however, grew much faster. They doubled starting from an almost similar position, that is around 20%, their urbanization went up to around 40%. China crossed 50% limit. So that means urbanization has been occurring in India, but at a slower rate if we look at similar countries. Now, why is this? We can identify four reasons for this. First is that India uses a very conservative urban definition. So many settlements are considered to be rural, but if we adopt the definitions in other countries, they would be considered as urban. So if we reclassify the rural areas using a more liberal definition, we would find that instead of 31% India's urbanization level in 2011, the urbanization level would be 47%, which is close to China. Second is, as I've told you before, the gendered nature of rural to urban migration for work. So because of this, instead of the family migrating, it is only part of the family. Only the male worker who is migrating. His entire family, his wife, his parents, children, they stay behind in rural areas. And thirdly, you also have return migration. After retirement, some of the migrant workers return back to the rural areas. And the final reason is, as we had seen in the last class, just the urban population need not grow. The rural population, what pace the rural population is growing, is also important. So if the urban population is increasing by 10% in a decade, which is pretty high, but the rural population is increasing by 12%, urbanization will actually decline. If you look at this figure, the last column, the urban-rural growth differential, you can see that up till 2001, it has gone down. In the 70s, it was 2, it fell sharply, a slight increase, then it has gone up. Sorry, this should be 211. Okay. Now, how did the cities evolve? See, during the British rule, when they first started ruling India after the Battle of Plassey, it was still a colonial state, of course, but it was basically under the British East India Company. So the focus was on international trade. Therefore, the focus or emphasis was on the three great port cities: Bombay, Chennai, and Calcutta. It was these cities, from the hinterland, commodities were brought into these cities, exported, and the imports were brought over here, landed over here, and then disbursed all over India. From the 19th century, that is after 1800, new cities started springing up. After 1857, the East India Company lost its power, and the crown, the queen took up, became the ruler of India, Kaisari Hind. So it was still economic motivations that were important, but now administrative and other concerns also became important. So in the 19th century, railways, the railway network developed. In India, the railway network was based on private capital. Now, a problem with private capital is that they are generally not very keen to invest in infrastructure. Can you tell me what is the reason for this? Why are people, why is private capital often not keen to invest in a new infrastructural development?
Sir, they wouldn't
So,
like to. Sorry, you speak.
হ্যাঁ বলো.
no, so what I wanted to say was they don't invest because the rate of return on that investment is very slow to like augment. Like it, there is virtually no return in the early years. It's
Yeah,
only later that when these industries develop that they return whatever amount was invested. So they won't make a profit on that investment until much later, maybe 20 or 50 years later.
it is called gestation lag. So infrastructure has a long gestation lag, as you have pointed out. But is there any other reason? There's another
Sir,
reason.
they do not like to be the bearers of risk because an infrastructure development like this could, involve a lot of risk factors. So, because they are they are undertaking private capital in development, that kind of would push them to the side of not taking any risk. So they would not like to go forward with this idea.
Okay, yeah, risk is also a factor, though it is connected with, to some extent, with gestation lag. Not exactly connected, but closely. Now, another reason, look at railways. How much investment do you require?
Sir, a
There's a
lot.
concept in microeconomics. Economies of scale. You can't invest a little bit. If you want to make it profitable, you reduce cost, you have to build up a huge infrastructure. Okay, so economies of scale, risk, long gestation lag. Private capital is generally not interested in investing in railways. But what the British government did was they offered a guarantee. So that means if you invested in capital in railways and for some reason there was a large profit in that particular year, you could you got that profit. But if you suffered losses or the rate of interest was very low, the government would give you this additional amount. So they declared a minimum amount, let us say 6%. So if you got a higher returns, fine, you got that. But if you got lower returns, 4%, -2, then the government gave you compensation. So that you will always get a minimum of 6%. Okay, so they basically uh, insured the investors against risk. And you had very odd risks. I mean, one problem was, this had two effects. One was that the incentive to reduce costs decreased. See, because you're getting a minimum returns. But if your return is not guaranteed, then you would try to take steps which will increase your revenue or decrease your costs. So the incentive to do so was lost. But at the same time, there were various problems regarding setting up railways. If you read the Cambridge economic history, the railways pattern was such that they came to a town and then went out. So they bypassed the towns. They stopped before the town, entering the town, made a circle or rather semicircle, and then went on. You understand the pattern? It is something like this. So you have a town like this. So the railways came like this. এইভাবে গেছে। And the reason was very odd. You see, the people, they did not, they were a bit scared of railways, and it was a novelty to them. So they used to stand beside the railway line, and when the train used to come, they indulged in the wonderful practice of throwing stones at the trains. So anyway, so the British government set up railways, and these railways led to the growth of small towns along trade routes. I mean, last year, Pushkar Moitro, one of our ex-students, had given a lecture, "The Long Arm of Railways." Unfortunately, it's not. We could not get a tape video because it's an ongoing work. But there's another paper which I can send you, a shorter paper. You can go through it and see how railways contributed to economic growth. And along with economic growth, it also led to the emergence of small towns along the rail routes. Simultaneously, you had the cantonments, places where the army would reside. You had the hill stations, Shimla, Dehradun. So during the long summer months, the capital used to shift from Delhi to Shimla, and the viceroy used to go over there. And simultaneously, the women also used to go over there to the hill stations along with the children. They could not bear the heat, the children would fall ill, so they went to the hill stations. And well, you had very some lovely dinner parties, ball dances, picnics. You had love affairs. You had all sorts of personal and intrigues going on in the hill stations. But for our part, what happened was the hill stations, cantonments had to be built. So you have towns coming up. Then, during the British rule, as the India became more integrated with the world economy, market towns started developing. So India was basically exporting agricultural products. So there were market towns where the products were brought in and then exported. In South India, mainly in Tamil Nadu, Coimbatore, Salem, Tiruchirappalli, Madurai belt, you had also had some small industrial clusters for specialized products. So it was in this way that cities started emerging in what was primarily a rural area. So first you had the port cities, then you had railways, hill stations, market towns, industrial clusters, and then after 47 you had an political cities. Cities were developed so that you could introduce more effective governance. So I've already discussed this, that uh, there were signs from 81, 91 that the pace of urbanization was coming down. And people believed that the census authorities published a report in which they said that India's population would be 358 million and the population growth would fall to 2.23 instead of 2.75. But in reality, the population growth was much faster by about 3.77 million. Instead of a growth rate of 2.23, it was 2.76, a very marginal increase. And the level of urbanization went up from 28% to 31%. So that means urbanization actually grew faster between 2001 and 2011. Okay. Now the drivers behind this force was, theoretically it can be natural increase between rural and urban areas, net rural urban classification, and net rural to urban migration. So the urban rural growth difference, okay, this first component, that was more or less stable. So it was this second and third component, migration and reclassification. That is the main driver behind urbanization in the last decade. Well, I won't say last decade, but because the last decade is 2011 to 21, we don't have the figures, but the starting decade of the millennium. If you look at the spatial map, you can see there's a sharp north-south divide. The southern part, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, this will be Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Karnataka, Kerala, have urbanized to a large extent. But other states like Madhya Pradesh, the so-called cow belt, have low patterns of urbanization. Yes. Yeah. As we have seen and as I've told you before, a main reason for factor explaining urbanization is the per capita income. So if a state has grown economically at a fast rate, urbanization will also be high. Okay. Now this is where I start from. Now the census of India has classified towns into or urban areas into 6 categories. More than 1 lakh, 50 to 1 lakh, 20 to 50,000 and so on. Okay. Now, for meaningful analysis, it is better if we classify class 4, 5 and 6 and call them small towns. Sorry. Class 1 towns are called metro cities, population more than 1 lakh. If you look at the pattern, the population, how the urban population is distributed between the different these class 4 cities, we have the metro cities. This is class 2, this is 3, this is 20,000, sorry, it should be this is 20 to 50,000. No, sorry, ঠিকই ছিল। Okay. So if you look at the population by categories, small towns, medium town, large towns. So we have categorized the last 2 categories, 5 and 6 together. So the first thing, this is the starting point, and you can see that almost half of the urban population lived in the small towns with population less than 20,000. So this is the small towns. Okay. If we go down, if you look at the picture now, from 5.86 it has gone up to 42.62. So it is almost half of the population. Small towns, which had almost half the population, is now only about slightly above 10%. What is interesting is this. The growth, there has been a tremendous growth in the population of metro cities, but the growth has occurred over the decades. Okay. But if you look at the last census, you will see that the last 3 categories, large towns, medium towns, small towns, in 2001, 31% of the urban population lived in these 3 towns. It has gone up to 34%. See, when we are talking about demographic features, 2.5, 1.8, these are considered to be pretty large figures because, as I've told you before, they grow very slowly. So 31.38 to 33.86, it's almost 2.5% per percentage point increase. So it's pretty large. So that means The urban metro population is going up, but it is tapering off. It is now this population, the smaller towns, that are becoming more important. And the problem is that these towns lack both the administrative resources and the finance to scale up the civic facilities. So, the growth of small towns in India is going to pose problems in the coming years. That how do we tackle the or serve the increasing population? This, sorry, just 1 second, please. Hello. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. I'm taking it. But go. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Who? Whom did you say? Who is the external expert? Okay. Okay. Yeah. IIPS. IIPS. Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Oh, Macquarie. Pundarik Mukhopadhyay. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. He has to see. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Let us see what she has said. Yeah. If it is doable, she can do it. Hmm. 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 Yeah. Let me see. Yeah. Okay. ठीक है. Yeah. Okay. Already. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Okay, sorry. Actually, one of my students' report had come in. Okay. So in this slide, I have plotted the number of metro cities. In 1901, there was only one metro city. Can you guess what the metro city was?
Sir, could you repeat the year?
1901. 1901.
1901. Okay.
স্যার কলকাতা কি?
Yes, Calcutta.
হুম।
So it was still capital, right? So possibly that was one of the reasons. In 1911, another city joined,
দিল্লি।
Bombay.
আচ্ছা
It was Bombay. Then it was Delhi. In 51, it remained at more or less two. Then in 51, Delhi, Chennai, and Hyderabad. And then it
Sir?
started from, yeah.
Sir, in 1911, when Bombay joined, was it due to a sudden spurt in Bombay's population or a decrease in Calcutta's?
No, there were two metro cities.
Okay.
And
No,
you
because
need not
that-
have a, yeah.
Yeah, that period was quite like politically like
No.
yeah, it
The
was
number of metro cities is going up steadily. So, and it need not be a sudden spurt also. See, I mean, both Calcutta, Bombay had high population. Calcutta had a slightly higher population. So Calcutta became the metro city. Within 3-4 years, Bombay also joined. Okay. So now currently, there are 6 cities which are called Class 1 metro cities. Populations with more than 5 million. And they have 1/5 of the total urban population. So, if you look at this population, 42 in metro cities, and out of them 6 cities contain about 20%. So this can be divided into 20 and 22. So you can see that it's a very dense population in the metro cities. So this is just the earlier diagram. You can see that. So the concentration of population in cities, particularly in million plus cities, the metro cities, has been a striking feature in the last millennium. And this may give the perception that cities are growing faster. The larger cities, metro cities, are growing faster than small and medium-sized towns. I mean, if you look at it, see, it's going from 5 to 42. This has gone up from 20 to 23. This has actually come down. This is 50. This has also come down, 15 to 12. But if you look at the growth rate, we will see that they are roughly the same rate. Both cities and towns have been growing at the same rate. In fact, what we have seen in the last census is the metro cities, growth in the metro cities are falling off. In fact, the growth rates are negative, decline. What is happening is, if you think of the city as such, so you can think of this as the core metro city, the core, and you have the periphery. So what is happening is, the periphery is going up. The periphery is expanding sharply. Okay, so this is the core city. The suburbs, what we call the suburbs, Navi Bombay. In our cases, up to Barakpur. In the south part of Calcutta, Rajarpur, east part, the Rajarhat area. In the south, Sonarpur, Baruipur, these are growing very fast, and this is leading to the fast growth of the metro cities. So basically what is happening is a geographical expansion of urbanization. It is not growth over here, but simply that urbanization is spilling over and the surrounding areas are too becoming part of this urban conglomeration. Simultaneously, you are having new towns which are coming up. So rural areas are growing and are being converted to new towns. Now, as I've told you, that civic facilities will become an important issue, particularly in the new towns. If we look at the rural urban differences, we can see that it's higher in urban areas, which is to be expected. If you look at electricity, pretty high, satisfactory. Toilet facility is coming down, drain pretty low. Water 80%, LPG very low, 60%. So why is LPG important?
So the firewood used to cook food would be poisonous, destroys the health of people.
Yeah, air pollution, as you pointed out. And it is indoor air pollution which is even more important. See, if the pollution occurs outside the house, it dissipates as a result of air currents. It spreads over a large area. And so the adverse effect declines slightly. But in case of indoor air pollution, there's no such particularly in slums where there's no ventilation. So the pollution is going to be bad, and it is going to remain bad throughout the day. So that is why a shift to LPG is desirable. It has environmental and health consequences. But here we can see it's a problem. In urban areas, it's not a problem because, yeah, you're cooking, you're using carbon based fuels, but you're cooking outside. You're cooking in the মানে বাড়ির উঠোনে তোমরা রান্না করছো, সুতরাং অতটা পলিউশন হচ্ছে না। Another concerning fact which does not come out from the picture is the inequality, variations. There's variation across states, there's variation across cities of different size classes. The metro cities are better off, the small towns are worse off. Okay. So to sum up, there's a declining trend in the urban.
রুরালে কোনো ড্রেনেজ নেই?
না, আমি ফিগারটা পাইনি।
Oh.
I didn't get the figure. But thank you for pointing it out. So in the 80s and 90s, starting from the 80s, there was a declining trend in the urban population growth. So urbanization was going to plateau off. One would expect that this trend will continue, but it did not. It reversed. Population growth, urban population growth, that is the level of urbanization, was faster in this current millennium. Urban population increased sharply, and the increase was more than the increase in rural population. This was fueled partly by migration, partly by the rural to urban classification. A huge number of towns emerged, and this contributed to the speeding up of urbanization. The growth of the small towns, satellite towns, was also greater than that of metro cities. This is going to pose a crisis with respect to civic facilities. Another problem that is going to come up is that of slums. So, as one of the groups, this taken from the group presentation. In fact, the definition also is from the same group. So slums are very densely populated area. The buildings are close to each other. Facilities are not there. And, well, I mean, the population, World Bank estimates that about 1 out of 3 Indian persons live in slums, 35.2%. And the highest slum population is in Maharashtra. When we talk about Maharashtra, what is the slum that comes up immediately?
Dharavi.
Dharavi, yeah. Have you been to anyone seen Dharavi?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So then it is Andhra Pradesh. We are not too bad off, followed by UP, Tamil Nadu, Madhya Pradesh. So if it, Delhi also has got a very high slum population. So this is the spatial distribution. This is the bubble map. So this is also something that you can draw in the geoda. Just practice a little bit. I mean, just look at the maps, and I think you'll get this bubble map option. 9 states have slum populations, which is higher than the national average. The problem with the slums is civic facilities. In fact, there are two problems. One is that these slums, there has not been any adequate provisioning of civic facilities, what we can call lack of development in the slum areas. So the civic authorities have not extended water, drainage, electricity to the slums. In fact, I had calculated that in Dhaka slums, 47% of the slum population share a toilet with at least 20 other households. So it is lack of development in the slums that is a problem. This is leading to these facts. 35% do not have access to tap water. 6 out of 10, 60% do not have drainage facilities. But at the same time, the problem is because of growth also. You have unplanned transport growth, and all this is, you have overcrowding, and this is affecting the living conditions, which are becoming insanitary. So simultaneously, growth and lack of growth is causing problems in slum. You do not have adequate facilities, living conditions deteriorate, and health indicators worsen. In fact, NFHS studies show that health facilities are worse than in rural areas. So if you rank it, urban areas are best, non-slum urban areas, followed by rural areas, and the worst is the slums in the metro cities. But at the same time, one should not say that we can't do anything, it's a horrible state. See, because you have very close and densely populated places, the slum is very close, a large number of households, you can have economies of scale. So that means if you invest, you can get very high returns to investment. By investment, I mean in civic facilities. If you just set up one tap in a densely populated area, you can serve a large number of households. But if you set up a tap in a rural area, very few people, I mean, the population, the households are spread so far out that only few people can access it. So when we are talking about, I mean, obviously there has to be something done about the slums. If you look at the strategy being practiced in West Bengal, in Calcutta, one of the practices is relocation and resettlement. If you had gone to Park Circus about 10 years ago, there's a slum, a very nasty type of slum besides the Park Circus station. But now if you go there, the area is clean. So they have been relocated elsewhere. Model bastis have been built up, permanent houses with 4 or 5 stories, and people have been told that, okay, you go there and settle. So this can be an option, but more important is in situ development. So you keep the slum people over there, but you develop or upgrade the slums. And here, sanitation and health are going to be the key challenges. Finally, once we see, okay, when we are talking about sanitation, this is a very old map of London, 1854. So there was a cholera epidemic over there. And it's not very evident, but you can see these are heat maps. So you can see that this large circle means there has been a lot of cholera deaths in this area. So in the white areas, there has not been any deaths. Light yellow means a few deaths, orange means, and red, intermediate deaths, red is a large number of deaths. So people were very much puzzled, and they believed that air pollution was leading to the deaths. Then a doctor called John Snow came up and he made this mapping. And then he
Sir, a
found
doctor called who?
Jon Snow. He's not a character in Game of Thrones.
Yes, sir, understood.
Yeah. Okay. So you can see there's a hotspot over here, another over here. Okay. If you see very closely over here, it's not very evident, but there was a water pump over here. Okay, so actually what was happening is, if you think this as London, two parts of London, the river Thames is flowing like this. Okay. And two water companies was providing the water to the citizens of London. Achha. What was happening is, one of the companies were taking water upstream, so somewhere like here, and then they were distributing to the southern part of London. By the way, this is both the same part of London, but let me draw it, otherwise you're going to get confused. So you have the river Thames over here, and the company was taking water upstream and distributing mainly over to this part of London. So there were no cholera deaths over here. The other company was taking water from downstream. And what was happening is, you had the industrial sector over here. So the factories were located in this belt, and they were releasing their pollutants into the water. Okay, so the water was getting polluted. And now the second company was taking this polluted water and sending it to this part of London. So John Snow he mapped the death along with the water pumps, and he found that, see, there's a water pump over here. There should be another water pump over here, this part. It's not very clear from this. That's why I kept both the maps. So what he found was that near the water pumps, you were having a large number of deaths. And these water pumps were being served by this company. The other water pumps, which were being served by this company, the blue company, yeah, there were some deaths, but it was relatively few. So he related slums, insanitary living conditions, water supply, and cholera death. So you have to face sanitation, water supply in the slums. Health services is an important cause, and the focus should be on immunization of children. They are most vulnerable. Their immunity is lowest. And surveillance. So that means you should have a tracking system to identify what is happening to the nutritional status of children. So every month the data is collected and fed into a central data bank. So you know, okay, this child is worsening, this child is improving, and you can take remedial action. Simultaneously, you should have public involvement of the slum dwellers. So the planning process should not be just from the top. it should also involve the stakeholders in the process. Okay, so I'm ending at this point. Give me just 2 minutes. I'll come back in 3 minutes, please. Okay, so I have finished the second topic, urbanization. In fact, the references for this topic is there are two references. One is there's a book by paper by Bhagat, which is published in EPW. So, there's another, but I mainly taught from that paper. In addition, there's a working paper by Tumbe, Chinmay Tumbe, which I've also used. So these will be your standard references. I'll post them in the Google Classroom. And I won't give out any assignments now. You can take a break, enjoy yourself. So next week, I'll give you some assignments. Okay, so I'm ending now. If you have any questions or require any clarifications,